Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Sam Davis with Dylan Balsamo. Pleased to be joined by Brandon Scoopy Robinson, new NBA analyst at Bally Sports. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time today to be with us.
Gentlemen, thank you. I couldn't think of any place else that I would be today. So thank you for gracing me with your presence.
That's so kind of you. Very, very appreciative. We're going to start with the Brooklyn Nets here in the NBA, of course. Of course, they lost Game 6 on Thursday night. Game 7 coming up on Saturday. What do you think Brooklyn needs to do to win that game on Saturday? What's the keys for them Saturday night in Game 7?
Well, they've been playing with 1.5 stars since game 4 when they lost Kyrie. I think the biggest difference maker is going to be number one, a strong showing from Joe Harris, which they need desperately. And number two, a repeat performance of some sorts from Jeff Green, 27 points, to set the Nets record for the most points off the bench. You know what KD can do. We saw that exemplified in Game 5. But, ultimately, the sooner they get this done, well, it's the last dance, so to speak. But if they get this done, they'll be able to take on either the Sixers or Atlanta and, hopefully take it to the next round. But if not, hard-fought fight for the Milwaukee Bucks, who've come from, an 0-2 deficit to make it a Game 7.
Brandon, and thank you again for joining us.
Pleasure.
The Nets have had an obstacle course of injuries to this point in the playoffs so far, just through having to navigate different things. And something I've wondered about them ever since they traded for James Harden is, the pressure was already rather high in Brooklyn to win. But then after the Harden trade, it went through the roof and all the pressure was there. Do you think that somehow psychologically, in some sense, plays a part in when, you look at, a couple days ago, they weren't able to seal the deal. Do you think that has something to do with things here? Maybe it taking some kind of emotional toll on them?
No, because this is what you sign up for. And then when you look at year 2 of their partnership, year 1 was kind of, like that free trial when you sign up for something so you can just get the free benefits, and then, the company hopes you forget, and then they'll charge you $30 on your credit card every month. I think when you look at this situation with the Brooklyn Nets in year 2, it's kind of similar in my mind in the breakdown of both the Clippers and the Lakers in their year 2. If you look at the Lakers in their year 2 partnership with LeBron James, they won a championship in the bubble. In year 1, LeBron was hurt. He hurt his hamstring, and it was, underreported. And, ultimately them actually losing gave them the 4th overall pick in the 2019 NBA draft, which they traded to get Anthony Davis. Comparatively, when you look at the Nets in year 2 of their partnership with KD and Kyrie, Kyrie had the thoracic bursitis in his shoulder. And then, KD already told you that he was not playing in last year's season. And so when you look at year 2, there's pressure because I think it's an easier route this year to win a championship than last year, or even next year, rather, because the Lakers will be healthy. The Nuggets will have Jamal Murray healthy. The Clippers will still have Paul George under contract. We'll wait and see what happens with Kawhi. But I'll add that, the year 2 scenario for the Clippers, there's a lot of pressure on them too, because year 1, it was the pressure of getting everything together. And then, Doc Rivers ended up leaving. And I think when you look at the Nets comparatively, they're in a situation where they're in the right spot to win it all. When you have 3 stars of that magnitude, the expectation is going to be very high. And I actually think the pressure is a lot more for the Nets than it is Milwaukee. Although I think for Milwaukee, the subject at hand will be the future of Mike Budenholzer. Every indication that I've gotten is that if they don't make a deep run into the playoffs, he may not be in Milwaukee next year, which opens up an 8th head coaching job in the NBA. So I think for the Nets, specifically to your question, there's pressure because you bought all this we bought all your fine china out. You expect to have a Christmas party. So there's pressure.
Here with Brandon Robinson, one-on-one here. Shifting over, still sticking with the Nets, but from, KD, of course, obviously has been a big part of this entire series, of course, as he is. Harden has been a little bit absent. Maybe part of that is due to his injury. Can you expect more out of James Harden come Game 7? Should you expect more coming off that injury, of course?
I think James Harden is there. And I think that the Nets weren't expecting to bring that fight China out. I think they were expecting to kind of close it a lot earlier. And so I think what's been to the Nets' detriment is this. When the Nets were bringing in James Harden for the Nets to potentially win a championship, they were expecting him to be high octane all season. I'll share this with you. I spoke to a top tier free agent during the buyout period who shared with me that they were very hesitant to join the Nets because they worried about James Harden's conditioning as well as just his upkeep to last him throughout the course of the season. They also had questions about Kyrie Irving's mental. And they had questions about Kevin Durant's ability to finish the season and go deep in the playoffs. And this particular gentleman who shared that with me was right about Kevin Durant. The Kyrie thing, I think he's played well, minus getting hurt. And the James Harden thing, came to fruition as far as, getting hurt in game 1 and only playing 43 seconds in the game. So to your original question, I don't expect much from James Harden because I think he's still healing. And I also think that when you look at the Nets, their biggest detriment, in my opinion, in game 6 was this. I think the Nets were looking like the San Antonio Spurs in the half-court system back when Duncan was playing, and they do their damage in the break. And honestly, the Bucks were playing like the Nets, grabbing rebounds and pushing the ball on the break. That's Kyrie's lane. That's Kevin Durant's lane. That's James Harden's lane. And I really think that the Nets, since game 5, have been playing with 1.5 stars. It just so happened that, in game 5, Jeff Green, coming off of plantar fasciitis, came up big and really was filling gaps that you would expect from Joe Harris. And Blake Griffin was pretty active the first couple of games at the beginning of the series, like games 1 and 2 and somewhat 3. Kind of, in my opinion, kind of been quiet. And I just think that the Nets collectively have to get all their names together, named Mike James, as well as Blake Griffin, as well as Landry Shamet and Joe Harris. I think that in order for the Nets to be successful, is legitimately going to have to be all hands on deck.
Scoopy, you look at this Nets team as we've been talking about, and if they have 2 of their 3 stars, they usually still win. Whether that be during the regular season or during this playoff run here.
Right.
And you look at the other series going on in the Eastern Conference right now as we record this. The Atlanta Hawks, the 5 seed, have a 3-2 lead over the 1 seed Philadelphia 76ers. The Hawks have surprised a lot of people during these playoffs. We saw what they did to the Knicks, and right now they have the lead over the 1 seed and the Sixers. This Brooklyn team, if they win Game 7, will have just squeezed by Milwaukee in a series that I don't think anyone expected to be as close as it was. So, you look at the Nets, if they're able to get through for the remainder of the playoffs, and excuse my dog barking in the background.
He's a Nets fan, I can tell.
He certainly is. He really is. What is your amount of worry for the Nets regarding the rest of the playoffs if they're to win Game 7?
I think the Hawks surprised a lot of people just because they beat the Knicks. But that's who the Hawks have been all season. I mean, when you look at the Atlanta Hawks, you went from a team in February that got rid of their head coach and Lloyd Pierce at the All-Star break in March, rather, like February, March, they were in the doldrums, and replaced them with interim head coach who was an assistant coach in Nate McMillan. And the line started opening up. The other benefactor for the Hawks has been the acquisition of Lou Williams, who in the last game against the Sixers came off the bench and scored 15 points. I think 15 points in 14 minutes, I think was the stat. And I think it was 11 points within 4 minutes. It was somewhere along that line. I wrote that in my column in BallySports.com the other day. But this is what I'll say. As much as people pay attention to Trae Young, it's more than Trae Young. on the floor that's been beneficial for the Hawks. I'll add that John Collins and Clint Capella have been literally the heart and soul of the marching band. If you watch the movie Drumline, they talk about the heart and soul of the band is the drums. They've been the drum players. They've been the bass drum. They've been the snare drum. They've been the cymbals. They've been all of those inner workings. But I'll add Lou Williams has been one band, one sound that has united the drums and the orchestra player that is Trey Young. My stepfather's a musician, pardon me.
I was just about to say, as a former tuba player in a marching band myself, I would argue the low brass is a very important heart and soul of a marching band. But keep going.
But as an alto sax player, I will agree with you. Actually, you're brass, I'm woodwind. But I do think that when you look at the Atlanta Hawks, also, I think one thing that gets lost in translation, particularly in the last game, which I believe was Game 5 for the Hawks and the Sixers, was this. Joel Embiid and Seth Curry can't be the only scorers on that team. And in fact, if you look at the stat sheet, Tobias Harris, who in my mind does equate the third star on a big three with the Sixers, which includes Embiid and Simmons, only had 4 points. Simmons had 9 points. Furkan Korkmaz has, I have to practice that name in the mirror, but Furkan had 8 points in that game. Seth Curry and Joel Embiid can't be the only productive guys in the fourth quarter. And the tale of two halves is really what did them in. And I think you're seeing a regular occurrence in this particular series where both teams are playing from behind. And you saw it in Game 1 where the Hawks had a huge lead and the Sixers only lost by 4 points. I think there's something to be said about getting comfortable leads and then getting comfortable in the second half. And me personally, I'd rather have a 10 or 15 point lead than have a 26 to 30 point lead at the half and then wet the bed. And I think you saw it even in the Brooklyn game in Game 6, where, if I'm not mistaken, in the second quarter, the Bucks led by as many as either 13 or 15 points and went into the half only trailing like by 3 or 5 points. It's something about teams in comfortable leads that doesn't sit well with me.